Okay, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining this session on public perception and policy as part of the Map the Gaps Symposium. It's a great pleasure to have you here with us today for this panel discussion. My name is David Miller, and I'm Government Accounts Director for FUGRO in the Americas region. I'm also a member of the JEBCO Guiding Committee. Before we begin the session, I wanted to let you all know that the session is being recorded, and the recording of the session will be posted on the Map the Gaps YouTube channel shortly after the session. So we'll be able to go back and view or share the link with friends and colleagues. So today's session is on public perception and policy, and we have a wonderful group of speakers assembled today for this session. In terms of format, we are going to have each of our speakers provide some introductory remarks. And then when all of the speakers have completed the introductory remarks, we will have a moderated Q&A for roughly 30 minutes. And I will initiate that with some questions that we had prepared with the speakers, and then we'll transition to questions from the audience. So in terms of the session, Seabed 2030 project is a collaborative project between the Nippon Foundation and JEBCO to inspire the complete mapping of the world's oceans by 2030, and to compile all bathymetric data into the freely available JEBCO Ocean Map. In order to inspire the complete mapping of the world's oceans, however, it's critically important that society, policymakers, and the public at large understand and appreciate the value of the oceans, including ocean mapping, to the health and sustainability of planet Earth. As a community, we need to grow our awareness, build knowledge, and drive action in the general public to restore and protect the ocean via improved ocean science. This session will look at various initiatives that are focused on trying to improve society's understanding and appreciation for the oceans. We have several speakers joining us today, and I'll introduce them here now. We're going to start with Dr. Carly Weiner. She's an environmental communications professional who is the Director of Communications and Engagement Strategy at Schmidt Ocean Institute, a Seabed 2030 partner and a member of the UN Decade Alliance. Carly will be wearing two hats in our session today. As co-chair of the Ocean Decade Communications Advisory Group, she'll be addressing public perception and policy from the perspective of the UN Ocean Decade. And in her Schmidt Ocean Institute capacity, she'll be addressing the topic from the perspective of Ocean Rising, which is a communications collaboration between Schmidt and Nekton Foundation. Carly will be followed by Maddie Redwig. Maddie is a marine biologist with expertise in fisheries science and management, ecological science and policy, coastal community resilience, and ocean weather climate science policy. She is a science program lead at OceanX and will be addressing public perception and policy from the perspective of OceanX, which focuses on the film and media side of ocean science and discovery to inspire the next generation of scientists and ocean advocates. And then we'll have Susan Haynes and Dr. Diana Payne to speak with regards to ocean literacy. Both are marine science education professionals. Susan is the education program manager at NOAA Ocean Exploration, and Diana is the associate professor and education coordinator at the University of Connecticut and Connecticut Sea Grant. Both are active in the National Marine Educators Association and collaborate on ocean literacy at NOAA. It'll be through an ocean literacy lens that they will be addressing public perception and policy, with Diana focusing on the history and evolution of the ocean literacy concept, and Susan sharing recent impacts, current happenings, and relevance. So with these introductions, I would like to jump into our session and have Carly start with her presentation. Over to you, Carly.
Thank you so much, David. I'm really pleased to be here and be able to wear two hats to share a little bit more about some of our work engaging with the public So what I'll start to do is just share my presentation here and jump right into it. So I'll start with our work with the UN Decade for Ocean Science, and I'm representing the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development in my co-chair of the Communication Advisory Group role. So I will do my best to sort of walk us through a little bit about the decade. So the decade was born out of the Sustainable Development Goals, number 14, Life Below Water. For those of you that aren't familiar with these goals, they are 17 interlinked global goals, which are a blueprint to achieve a more sustainable future for all. They were set up in 2015 by the United Nations General Assembly, but like Seabed 2030, have a goal of achieving this by that year. And the goal is to really empower decision makers with science solutions and societal outcomes. Of this, the UN Decade for Ocean Sciences was born in 2017, again by the United Nations General Assembly. And 3 years of planning took place to get the decade, beginning in 2021, on board. The decade seeks to stimulate ocean science and knowledge generation and reverse the decline in the state of our current ocean systems and really catalyze opportunities for sustainable development. Seabed mapping is a big part of this, and the vision for the Ocean Decade is the science we need for the ocean we want. A lot of work has gone into engaging stakeholders and the public, as well as policymakers, into the agenda and having science-based solutions. It's been a participatory process, and as mentioned, it was a 3-year intensive engagement with thousands of stakeholders globally through regional thematic meetings that have dialogues around specific issues, as well as ways to underpin the development of the implementation plan. There's also been an executive planning group, which has played a significant role in this process. As you see here, we have 10 decade actions, and these are sort of underpinning a lot of the programmatic work that's being done. There's synergies around these 10 topics, and last year, the endorsement of the first decade actions came out. So right now we have 361 endorsed decade actions. The second call for decade actions is currently out, and these are actions that are focused around some of these specific challenges. And the decade right now is that the actions are out there for is marine pollution and multiple stressors on marine ecosystems and the ocean climate nexus. We also have the Ocean Decade Alliance, which David mentioned, and this is a network of partners that are helping to not only provide financial or in-kind support, but help to leverage resources, commitments, and strategic advice for the decade. And these partners span globally from countries such as Canada, Sweden, Norway, Japan, Portugal, and the Republic of Korea, to organizations such as RevOcean, Terra Foundation, Fugro, and Schmidt Ocean Institute, to name a few. The decade is working with stakeholders across the board, so regional partners, media partners, industry, and philanthropy, as well as policymakers. And within these areas are creating partnerships and alliances to further the decade's goals. Now, of course, the decade coming on board in 2021 has been met with challenges because of the global pandemic crisis. So a lot of the engagement with the public has taken place in the virtual space. This has created challenges, but also opportunities to engage people globally all at the same time. They've done so with a series of events from Ocean Decade virtual series, as well as the Ocean Decade laboratories, which have been thematic and put out in every few months to tackle some of these topics. They allow for information, networking, and collaboration, which is a big piece of the decade. And just recently, a few months ago, the decade launched its new website. I highly recommend, if you haven't gone to take a look at it, to explore the new website. It was a complete revamp to create platform for public engagement. And what it does is create a more public-oriented portal that allows for people to engage more deeply with the decade. There are 4 areas where you can get involved in the structure of the website, from taking action to understanding the ocean decade ecosystem, about the decade, and learning news or the latest events that are taking place. From this website, there'll also be launching early next year Generation Ocean, which is a global campaign to sort of engage the public and younger generation in helping to reverse the decline of ocean health through knowledge-based actions. And what the campaign is looking to do is featuring stories globally of everyday people doing big things for the ocean. And this will be primarily showcased on social media, through the website and brochures, and will really have a youth-oriented audience for it. Decade has also taken action to really create materials and make communications available to all. They have engaged in partnerships with the press, from Eco Magazine, Nautilus Magazine here in the US, or globally with groups like The Conversation. They've also created informational brochures and branding guidelines that all of the endorsed actions can use, have taken active social media accounts, and created a Trello board for materials that everybody can use to help post and push out communications work. And the latest in engaging the public has been the Global Stakeholder Hub. This is an interactive platform where people can network and get involved in the Ocean Decade community. It has both thematic and geographical communities of practice that allow people to really engage with the decade in an active way. And I highly encourage everybody to sign up and play around with the platform, which they can do through the website. And as I mentioned, my participation here is through the Communications Advisory Group. This group just hit its 1-year anniversary, and it's comprised of international communications experts that are working together to help advise the decade on some of their communications platforms. There are 4 working groups within this advisory group, which include an inclusivity group focused on language translation and accessibility of Ocean Decade materials, Generation Ocean Task Force to help advise the campaign and work directly to support the Ocean Decade Secretariat, an Ocean Decades Communications Plan group, as well as a museums and aquariums group to help adapt some of the Generation Ocean materials. And finally, the decade is working towards coming together in person in June of next year, from June 27th to July 2nd, for the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon, Portugal. And I'll be happy to discuss further the decade's role in policy development and public. But before we do that, I also want to switch hats and talk a little bit about the Ocean Rising Project. This is a collaboration between Schmidt Ocean Institute and Necton that came about in 2021 of this year. It actually had earlier roots with Schmidt Ocean Institute's executive director, Dr. Jyotika Vermani, who was once at X Prize, and in 2016 formulated a group to bring people together to talk about how to inspire the public in the ocean space. And during this meeting, X Prize had a lot of experience with the space community, and parallels were drawn between the space and ocean community to look at what had made space so successful in popular culture and why oceans had not had that notoriety amongst the public. Stemming from that 2016 meeting, we revisited some of the discussion that took place and put out a blog on the World Economic Forum that looked at how people can be inspired to connect with the ocean. From that, we developed a white paper called Ocean Rising: The Quest to Inspire the Public. And that white paper is available freely on Schmidt Ocean Institute's website. The white paper looked at 3 areas: what is being missed, what are some shining examples of oceans in popular culture, and how do we move forward to make this more popular. White paper binned 5 areas of engagement where we really can take action, and those included the arts, broadcast media, social media, sports and gaming, and industry. And those 5 broad areas were then tightened up into 8 focus groups or focus areas, and that included arts, fashion, food, gaming, sports, social media, news, and literature. And those 8 groups were then furthered into an online workshop. It was part of one of those Ocean Decade laboratories that I just spoke about in July. This one was focused on an engaging and inspiring ocean. And in this workshop, we brought in 8 experts for each of these areas to show examples of things that had worked in each of these industries or sectors, and then to engage and lead in conversation. We had Stephanie Smith from NASA, Mark Towell from 11th Hour Racing, Tom Kay from Finister, Alan Gershenfeld from Eline Media, Fernanda Oyrazon, who is an artist and scientist based in South America, Sandy McIntyre from Associated Press, Monique Rofi, who represented the literature section, and Dr. Serge Raymaker for food. And each of these experts not only shared some of their experiences, but engaged a group in conversation about how to move forward and what is missing. The results of this came into a written document, which is also available on the website, and then was summarized in a follow-up podcast with Dr. Jyotika Vermani from SOI and Oliver Steeds from Nectin in a podcast as part of Nectin's Catch Our Drift podcast, which is an excellent podcast. If you haven't listened to it, I highly recommend you take a look. So what do we do now moving forward? So the Ocean Rising is now looking at how we can continue to engage the public in these 8 sectors by leading with example and coming up with some specific projects. So I look forward to updating everybody more on that. But in the meantime, I wanted to share a few examples of how Schmidt Ocean Institute is engaging with the public and trying to get oceans into the public sector more and more. The first example I wanted to share is with Nautilus Magazine, a magazine that came out with an ocean channel last year. This provided ocean content for its users as well as a printed magazine version. They are now moving forward in next year into expanding the ocean's content with 4 specific areas, including 30 by 30, blue economy, data, and the Ocean Decade. SOI is thrilled to be facilitating a relationship with the Ocean Decade and having a dedicated print as well as online version of some of those articles. We'll also be working with Nautilus with some in-person events, as well as looking at how we can further engage this content, which will also be shared on their mainstream Nautilus channel. Another example is Schmidt Ocean Institute's Artist at Sea program, which has been bringing artists on our ship Falkor since 2015. We have had 42 artists participate in this program, working with scientists to incorporate data and scientific results into their work. I share a few examples here that really focus on seafloor mapping. We've had a comic book artist come and create a comic book aimed or targeted for middle school children about mapping the seafloor. We've had artists incorporate actual seafloor maps, as well as their experience helping to create those maps at sea into their work. These arts are exhibited in traveling exhibitions as well as online, and we are working in the next year to exhibit the works in the UK and Australia. Some of these were also recently shared at COP26 in Glasgow. Another example is taking some of the incredible footage that we were able to collect after mapping the seafloor and putting this into short film documentaries. We've then entered these into film festivals where a broader public is coming together to look at different types of films and being able to insert some of the deep sea issues into these areas. I'm proud to say we have had 3 official selections and 1 win recently with the Silicon Beach Film Festival, as well as the Nature Without Borders International Film Festival and the Sherman Oaks Film Festival. We're also working with museums and aquariums to better get our footage and collection out to the public. This week, we just launched our Ocean, Our Future exhibit at the Australian National Maritime Museum, where some of our work in Australia from 2020 and 2021 is exhibited in Darling Harbour and the poles that you see here. You'll see some of those incredible maps, as well as the discovery of a new tall coral reef in the Great Barrier Reef, which we've also featured, as well as interactive exhibits as indoors and a film. And finally, we are working with World Ocean Observatory to create a virtual aquarium focused on the deep sea with species and systems that you wouldn't yet normally be able to see in an indoor aquarium. So there'll be a whale fall interactive exhibit, a hydrothermal vent interactive exhibit, as well as different species that you'll be able to interact with. So in summary, I just wanted to kind of draw conclusions between these two different programs, but to say that really the ocean community is coming together to reframe the ocean as exciting and interesting, and re-engaging with storytellers in ways that can bring effective and inspiring collaborations. Infusing the public in substantive and meaningful ways is really important to target stakeholders that are not often considered in ocean science communication. Thanks, and I'll pass it back to you, David.
Thanks, Carly. That was really, really great. And your work is fantastic at Schmidt, both as well as Ocean Rising and support of the decades. So really great. And look forward to the discussion here when we finish with the other the introductory remarks. So next up is Maddie Redwig from OceanX, and she'll share her work from OceanX's perspective. So over to you, Maddie.
Always muted. Great. Thank you, David. So first, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for attending this. I think it's so important for us to be in this forum talking about how we can make our work more accessible to the public in various ways and through various meaningful partnerships. So I just wanted to share a little bit of right off the bat about OceanX. So as you might be aware, OceanX is a nonprofit dedicated to exploring the ocean and bringing science and discovery back to the world. So within OceanX, we have several pillars. So the ship, OceanX Media, which is our storytelling and social media, as well as our digital communications and PR team, our science program, which I lead, and then of course our ever important and ever growing partnerships pillar. So with the ship, which is really the cornerstone of our program, we really designed it in collaboration with a lot of different organizations and a lot of different leading media producers and production design and set design people to really give people on board a sense that they were on the world's most advanced research and media platform. It's 285 feet. Most people are aware we have 2 1,000-meter depth-rated submersibles, 4 onboard labs, so 3 dry labs and 1 wet lab. We now have 2 6,000-meter depth-rated ROVs with a variety of science sampling and media equipment, a REMA 6000 AUV, a helicopter, of course, the CTD, the workhorse of any oceanographic research vessel, and then full seafloor and water column acoustic mapping capabilities. And all that technology is all fine and good, but if we don't have a way to communicate what we have and what we're learning and discovering while we're on expeditions to the people, we really aren't really fully executing our mission. So OceanX uses media to educate, inspire, and drive positive change for the oceans through cutting-edge and industry-leading storytelling. So some of that looks like partnering with National Geographic, the BBC, James Cameron, as well as other media organizations. We currently have more than 2.5 million followers on social media, a number which is growing in a very scary way every day. We've had over 4 million viewers of our Blue Planet giant screen TV film, as well as collaborating on both Blue Planet and Blue Planet 2, as well as Our Planet and the upcoming National Geographic series, Welcome to Earth with Will Smith. We've had more than 750,000 visitors at an American Museum of Natural History pop-up exhibit that featured bioluminescence and phytoplankton and zooplankton. And then, of course, our science program, which I obviously am personally a fan of. So we empower science and scientists all over the world to increase our knowledge and understanding of the ocean. So in 2021 and 2020, we have partnered with more than 20 scientific institutions in the areas that we're operating, which I'll go into in a little bit. So we work with local scientists and scientific collaborators at various institutions, both academic and government and nonprofit in each region that we operate to really add capacity to their existing work. We've also had formalized partnerships with organizations like NOAA, the Gloucester Marine Genomics Institute, Scripps, and University of New Hampshire. And then in the last year and a half of us operating, we've been quite busy. We've been to multiple countries. We've been at sea for most of the last year and a half and have had more than 100 sub dives, 150 ROV dives, most of those happening with both subs and the ROV in the water simultaneously, over 500 scuba dives, and then personal favorite, over 17,000 square kilometers mapped, which is, I guess I'll just say politely, way more than our previous research vessel, the Alusha, did, and it's more than 7 years of operating. So we're particularly proud of that as well. And then we're really committed to our partnerships, which is really how we advance our mission and share our mission with the world. So we like to refer to our partnerships as one big wave of change for the ocean. So this is a combination of advancing scientific breakthroughs, conservation efforts, and educational experiences with organizations like Bloomberg Philanthropies, More Charitable Foundation, and other major philanthropic endeavors. We recently have partnered with the Paradise Foundation in China, who play all of our media outputs on their CCTV channels, and also with the Prince Albert of Monaco Foundation, whom we've had very successful collaborations with thus far. My personal favorite is our new partnership with Crayola at their Crayola Experience exhibits to hopefully inspire the youngest generations. And actually, I'm currently in my hometown of Chandler, Arizona, and I will be going to the Crayola Experience at my local mall to hopefully inspire some landlocked kids to pursue their passions in marine science as they grow older. So again, just a little bit about the ship. As I mentioned, the submersibles, onboard labs, ROVs, AUV, what have you. But again, all of this is really designed to bring sort of attention and science communication and discovery back to the public, whatever forum that looks like. We have a bunch of media people come on board for every expedition to really tell the story. And all of our systems have been designed to be interactive and to have scientists and media working together in the same setting. Even for something, as you see here in the top right, as simple as looking through a microscope, we've really designed that to be an interactive experience for everyone involved. So we really sort of have, and our founders really believed in the hearts and minds approach. So bringing science and oceanic discovery and exploration and technology to an audience that maybe doesn't have direct access all the time to the ocean, or like many of the people in this room, myself included, wake up thinking about the ocean every day. So we're really trying to reach those audiences that don't really have or think they have a direct impact on the ocean. So we think that if people know more about the ocean through, again, exploration, scientific research, storytelling, and engagement and education, they will care more about the ocean and then act. So help us with advocacy and also inspire behavior and policy change. And again, we work with a variety of partners to do that. This past year, we had a massive undertaking, a global 6-part series for National Geographic called Ocean Explorers, which is a co-production between ourselves at OceanX, BBC Studios, and James Cameron. And the goal of this series was to target in individual areas along the Atlantic and bring science and discovery, and actually a nature documentary, not about animal behavior, though that's included, but about scientists doing science and studying areas and talking about what those areas need and the impact that ocean science and the challenges that their area faces within the ocean communities will face in the coming years. So we're very excited about this. This is obviously a big splashy show that has a lot of big splashy advertising initiatives, but what most people don't know is that we also have a massive impact strategy for the series itself. So this focuses on 6 pivotal areas: sustainability, human impact, marine protected areas, coral reefs, the deep, and marine mammals. And what this will look like is, in conjunction with the release of the series in more than 100 countries, we'll also partner with National Geographic Education, their channels worldwide, and do live classroom events for different local classrooms all over the world, but also in the regions where we're operating. We were really lucky in the last couple of months that one of our explorers, one of the scientists featured on board, was actually able to bring live classroom experiences back to her home, her hometown in South Africa, which was really inspiring for all of us. This impact series is going to look like, again, one big wave of change for the ocean. So this looks like short form and social media content. It looks like digital experiences through AR, VR, also through video game experiences. It will be pop-up experiences in museums all over the world. Educational initiatives, like I mentioned, with the Nat Geo live classrooms, and also workshop events. And then activations and advocacy. So this is partnering with other philanthropic global leaders to really create the capacity and to add the support in areas that need it most for advocacy for policy change. So with that, I just wanted to say thanks again for everybody for being here. Again, I think this is really important for all of us to be in the same forum and talking about how our organizations and our groups, such as the Symposium, can really achieve maximum impact with public perception, and then hopefully, therefore, policy change. And I would be remiss for not including my favorite Poorly Drawn Lines comic, which I think is particularly resonant with this audience at the Symposium. So thanks very much, all.
That's great. Thank you, Maddie, for sharing your great work at OceanX. Okay, for last speakers, we have Susan Hayes and Diana Payne to discuss ocean literacy and the work that NOAA is doing internationally with ocean literacy. So over to you folks. I will share your presentation as well.
David. I'm going to just give you guys a background on ocean literacy and how it started, and you've probably seen some slides mention of things like 7 things you should know about the ocean. That all kind of started with us. Thank you. Next slide.
Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Good.
Please. So what we found out in the mid-1990s was that, at least in the US, a lot of the general public did not know anything about the ocean or the ocean's influence on their everyday lives. We also knew that ocean-related topics were not, there was not a lot of it in curriculum and in schools. And we also wanted to get more ocean scientists involved in education and outreach. Next slide, please. So what did we do? We got a group of scientists, educators, and policymakers together to try and figure out what everyone should know about the ocean. So we had done some previous efforts on this, and it was a very transparent process. And the great part about it was that there was no single individual or institution that had ownership of this. So we came up with what was the first ocean literacy guide, which contained 7 essential principles, and at the time, 44 fundamental concepts, which now are 45. Next, please. We also defined ocean literacy in general. So ocean literacy is an understanding of the ocean's influence on you and your influence on the ocean. But that's really not enough. So we have a 3-pronged approach to ocean literacy. So it's not just about the content knowledge, but it's also being able to communicate about the ocean in a meaningful way and to make informed and responsible decisions regarding the ocean. Next slide, please. So what did those 7 big ideas or essential principles look like? Here are the 7 principles, and we tried to keep them kind of simplistic in language, but with very big ideas. And this has actually served us very well because this has been the basis for a global movement in ocean literacy. So not just in the US, which is what we're originally was intending for, but at a global level, it's really influenced a lot of different things, including the ocean decade. Next, please. And we weren't anticipating the impact it would have on other content areas. So shortly after the Ocean Literacy Guide was published, the climate literacy folks decided to publish their own climate literacy guide with 7 essential principles and various fundamental concepts. It also led to something else in the US, the Great Lakes Literacy Movement, as well as energy literacy, neuroscience, earth science literacy, and of course, our friends in the Mediterranean developed Mediterranean Sea literacy as well. Next, please. So what have we done essentially in the past 15 years? I've given you a very basic overview of the Ocean Literacy Guide. Susan's going to dive into that a little more deeply with Principle 7 specifically. But we also developed a scope and sequence for grades K through 12 to help formal and informal educators develop complex ocean science concept in their curriculum and their programs. The United States is not a country that has a national curriculum, but we do have something called the Next Generation Science Standards, which has been adopted by about half of our states. Educators in our country were asking us to align the Ocean Literacy Guide and the scope and sequence with some of the components of Next Generation Science Standards, which we have done for them. And one of the most recent iterations has been the development of an International Ocean Literacy Survey, which is translated into 17 languages and is focused on high school students. All of these 4 documents we call the framework, and you can find them at the website listed below. On that same website, we also have translations of the guide and several other resources. And our latest resource that we just released is called a Handbook for Increasing Ocean Literacy, which is an Ocean Decade endorsed activity and will be available on the same website early next year. And now I will turn it over to Susan for some more updates on what has happened with the campaign.
You're muted, Susan.
Susan still there?
If Susan is still muted, I can try and work through the rest of the slides if that's okay. If we can get her back, though, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the issue is.
Okay.
If you don't mind
All right.
proceeding, then we'll try to get her.
Okay, next slide, please. So some of the impacts of the Ocean Literacy Campaign. Several other organizations formed based on the 7 essential principles of ocean literacy. So you see some of the organizations listed here. A lot of them formed at the National Marine Educators Association conferences over time, including the International Pacific Marine Educators, MC, and the Asian Marine Educators Association. Next slide, please. We've also had several impacts at the international level, several things that are part of or led up to the Ocean Decade, which has already been mentioned before. So Francesca Santoro and several other co-authors developed the Ocean Literacy for All Toolkit in 2017. There's also the Ocean Literacy Portal, which is a one-stop shop for all things related to ocean literacy. And this is not just the science-based, it's also culture and arts and other aspects that have already been mentioned. Ocean Decade outcome number 7, an inspiring and engaging ocean, which you've seen on previous slides, was one of the first laboratories of the Ocean Decade back in July. And that is where a lot of the things that Susan and I are involved in kind of take shape, and been like a bit of a springboard for launching some of the ocean literacy campaign efforts. Next slide, please. So one of the things that both Susan and I are involved in is the Ocean Literacy with All program, which is part of the Ocean Decade. And there are three main goals of this program. One is to advance ocean literacy through international partnerships and networks, design and implement transformative local and global relevant research-based activities and projects by and for diverse stakeholders. And the third is to build capacity and behavior change to achieve an ocean literate society, which is one of the main focuses for this particular program in the Ocean Decade. Next slide, please. And again, just to reiterate, these are the 7 essential principles, but now I'm going to take a moment and just go a little bit deeper into principle number 7, which is the one that is probably most relevant for most of you, but also keep in mind that all 7 of these principles, some of the content may relate to your research and your mapping as well. Next slide, please. So these are some of the essential principles, fundamental concepts under the essential principle number 7. So you can see that there's several iterations of complexity within the fundamental concept. So it's the largest unexplored place on Earth. Exploration, experimentation, and discovery required to better understand the ocean. Sustainability of the ocean. Over the last 50 years, there's been a lot of use of ocean resources. Talks a little bit about new technologies and sensors and tools, the importance of models, and that ocean exploration is truly interdisciplinary. Next slide, please. And as you all know, it all begins with a map. So a lot of the products that you are producing as you're doing your ocean exploration and your mapping is actually leading to a better public understanding. And that's really what it's all about, because once the public begins to understand the importance of the ocean, and in our case, mapping, the more public support we'll have and the better decision makers we will have. Next slide, please. And this is just our contact information and a little bit of information about some of the ways that both Susan and I are strongly involved in not only just ocean literacy through NOAA and NMEA, but with the Ocean Decade as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana, and thank you for covering Susan as well. I'm not sure, hopefully Susan's technical issues have been corrected and she can join us for the Q&A. But thank you to all of our speakers today. Please turn your cameras on and come back for some from this discussion now. Really fantastic to see what's happening in this area. And I think all too often we focus on kind of the science itself and not necessarily the communication of the science and trying to convey the value and benefits of this work that we do as a community to the public. So it's really, really inspiring to see what is happening in the communications space. So I guess for those in the audience, if you have questions, you can start bringing them into the Q&A window now, and we'll try to get to those. I'll kick off the discussion now with a couple of questions to get things rolling. And I guess I'll start with kind of the education, communications, outreach, public engagement. They're all critical to improving society's understanding of and appreciation of our oceans. Welcome back, Susan.
Thanks.
In the opening and introductory remarks that you shared, you obviously described various programs and initiatives and ways that this can and should happen. I guess from your perspective, which very involved with the communications and the engagement, do you see making progress in changing public perception about the ocean? And I'd be interested in hearing your feedback. Obviously, the statistics that Maddie shared with regards to kind of number of viewers is quite impressive and speaks volumes, I think, in terms of that engagement. But I'd like to hear from everybody in terms where you think we are in terms of that process, and are we making progress? And what are some of the challenges and barriers that we face in this effort? And maybe we'll just go in the order that we gave the presentation. So Carly, you can start just briefly.
Yeah, absolutely. I always like to take an optimistic approach to these questions, and I think we actually are making progress. I think the example shared today, I mean, what Maddie was talking about, working with Crayola and, you know, having these unique partnerships or collaborations with groups that traditionally haven't been involved in the ocean space allows us to engage folks and students and people that, you know, may not necessarily gravitate immediately to the ocean. But I think if we meet them in their areas of interest and get them excited about the ocean, people are going to care a lot more about things they're passionate about. So if we can get people excited and passionate about the ocean, then we can get them to care, you know, and then we hit them with the science and the advocacy and everything else. But I also think we have another huge thing on our side, and that's technology. You know, in the last 10 years, the technology in the ocean space has made huge progress in ways. We can live stream our dives. We have people engaging in real time with science, helping to identify new species, helping to, you know, make commentaries on mapping new seafloor features. You know, this is engagement that we never had at our fingertips before. And so I think that helps propel us in a way that we haven't before.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks. Maddie, your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I would completely agree with Carly. I'm also very optimistic. I think for us, we're kind of a unique and very fortunate organization because we have the ability to follow what I would consider sometimes to be relatively short attention spans of mass audiences on the internet, because we have a very active and mighty social media team that's constantly looking for new ways to engage with the public on different platforms. For example, I'm not personally on TikTok, but I've heard our social media team talk about how insane the growth on TikTok has been, and how challenging it is to keep up with the demand and the appetite for new content, especially while people are still in lockdown through the pandemic. And so we sort of have that, and then we have sort of layers of different multimedia approaches like television series, but then also short form videos, and then also museum exhibits when people can go and get up and go to the museum. And then we're really lucky because then we get to always be going out there and making discoveries and doing ocean science and then bringing that new content to the general public. So I think that's really amazing. And again, we're very fortunate to be able to have that platform. But I do think also it's going to take a lot more established partnerships and a lot more coordination between all of our groups. I'm just so impressed with all of the work that the panelists on here have done, because I think, you know, sometimes we have a little bit being more on the media side of a reputation for being very flashy, but what people don't understand, and sorry for the sports reference here, but you have to dribble before you can dunk. And so I'm seeing a lot of amazing fundamentals here, and we tried to emulate that with our program as well, especially on the science side. And so I just think that future partnerships and will only help us increase that capacity.
Yeah, great. Thanks. And then from the ocean literacy standpoint perspective, kind of more on the education side, less flashy maybe, but really fundamentally important. Diana, Susan, your thoughts?
I'm happy to speak to that if you can hear me.
We hear you.
Okay, great. So sorry about the technical difficulties. Well, to bring it home to this group in particular, Tommy Fury a few years ago with a number of different education folks presented at the European Marine Science Educators Association conference, and was focused on why do we map and engaging educators in seabed mapping. And some of the barriers and challenges that they identified are ones that we all know, that, you know, visibility and understanding are, we're lacking a bit in the visibility side of things, but that's changing. Personal connection and general awareness of our general public and of our students and our teachers, teacher training and inclusion in formal education, and that general connection between your group and our group, you know, that connection between the science and the communication people and the educators. And I agree with Carly and Maddie. I feel very positive about it. The efforts and the needs are only going to increase as these projects associated with the decade continue. But my plea is for this group, this audience, to help us tell our stories, help us bring the most visual and compelling data and interdisciplinary ideas back to the classroom and back to the K-12 classroom. There are great education resources out there from many, many different countries. And as Carly said, the technology is changing, the discoveries are increasing. Just continue to support these communities that you work with in the education and communications realm. And with all the things that Diana presented, all these pieces that are going on in the decade, these components that are being carried forward, join us, join them, help us bring all of this colorful, incredible science into the right audiences to help us make them more ocean literate.
And I think the only thing that I would add is that if you touch a teacher or an educator, if they continue through their journey and stay in the profession, you're reaching students for 35 years or more. So yes, please help us bring that to the formal and informal education level.
Yeah, I think you all speak to the partnership, importance of partnerships, and I think that really is a good call to action for this group from the ocean mapping community, is to look at the work that's being done. How can we connect the ocean mapping efforts to these communication and education initiatives, right? I mean, we should be actively seeking for partnerships to bring that home. I think a follow-on to this, it sounds like we all are quite optimistic about the progress that's being made. I'm wondering if education, communications, outreach, and public engagement alone will change behaviors. Is that enough? Is simply getting the message out there and repeating it loud and proud globally to all corners of the globe and in all of these areas enough? Is it enough to change behaviors? And I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. And if not, how do we motivate the public to act and advocate? Will kind of this over a generation or two achieve the goal, or is there another layer beyond just the communications, the outreach, and the engagement that we anticipate? Again, maybe in order. Carly's caught her breath. We'll start with Carly.
I almost feel like we should go reverse order on this one, because there's so much literature in behavior change from perceptions. And I think Diane and Susan really have a background to address that best. So I'm very curious to hear what they have to say about that. But I will say, you know, unfortunately, on the less positive side, people are going to have to care, because it's going to impact them. It's going to affect them, whether, you know, with the changing climate, the ocean is going to be essential to their livelihood, whether they realize it now or not. And so that will impact behavior moving forward. The good news is the younger generation is more empowered and more educated with knowledge at their fingertips than anybody ever in the history has been before. And so that brings so much activism and engagement with it alone. But curious to see what the other panelists have to say about that.
Thanks, Maddie. Your side, and then we'll get to the educators.
We're not going in reverse. Okay. No, yeah, definitely. Very light softball question, David. Thank you very much for that one. No, I would say that, again, you know, it's so nice having such expertise in Diana and Susan on this panel, because that is an incredibly hard thing to quantify. It's almost unimaginable, the task itself. And so I think for us, you know, one thing that I think that we as a community are somewhat in danger of is sort of talking to each other in a vacuum or in a silo too much. So, you know, I don't have to convince any of you or any of the people that showed up to this session today that mapping is cool and the ocean is great and we should care about it. But I think what we want to do is try to reach the people that, again, like aren't necessarily thinking about the ocean every day and the impact it has on their daily life. And I think, again, through mixed media and through different platforms and being really creative, like, for example, the Artists at Sea program that Carly was talking about, I just think that's a fabulous program. And that reaches a whole layer of people that, you know, are thinking about how to visualize their impact on the world. For us, we have our little kind of example of when I think it was Blue Planet 2, maybe in the ancillaries material, the straw got pulled out of the sea turtle's nose, and then all of a sudden everybody was anti-straw and everybody really got behind that because it represented a small thing you could do that has a big impact. I think that was kind of one of the more quantifiable things that we saw for something that was kind of shocking in the media that then resulted in direct action. But I think it also kind of undervalues the hard work that policymakers and advocacy members had done for decades before that against straws, plastic, things like that. So I think that we just need to always keep in mind that there's multiple layers of people and institutions working on driving this behavior change. And while we can sort of highlight that and add capacity and shine spotlights on that with our platforms, there are lots of very smart people working on these issues as well.
Thanks. And now we'll have Susan and Diana address this question, which is important one from the education.
Sure. Well, I guess I'm happy to chime in here. I think one of the most important things is we have to bring it home and we have to make it real to students and to the general public. We have to find ways to tap in locally to, not only show a map of the Pacific to a student in Europe, but show them what's going on right off the coast of Ireland, wherever they are, bring it home to them and make it real. And this audience can help with that just based on the work that you do. The other thing that we are seeing across the globe is the need for ministries and school system administration at the very high level, at the political level, to buy into the need for ocean literacy. And that comes with these loud voices, these voices that say, our students need to understand this. And you can bring the magnificent pictures and the science that you're doing under the noses of those folks and into their eyes and into their vision, and show them the technologies that our students are capable of using now to bring these things home to them. I think those avenues are really important, and it takes us going beyond our own audience, right? As I think it was Maddie who said, we can't keep speaking to the choir, and you guys can't keep speaking to the choir. We have to go far beyond that to see these places where we can have the stronger impact.
Yep, and if you saw my notes, I think Susan and I wrote down the same darn things. Make it local, make it personal. The only thing that I would add is that, so the Ocean Literacy With All program within the Ocean Decade has a component that is focused on ocean literacy research. And this is one of the big things that we're talking about. Emma McKinley from the UK is a big researcher in this area. And one thing that we do know is that just knowledge, content knowledge, just attitudes and values isn't enough to promote behavior change. And there's even research that says, even if someone intends to do something, you have to follow up with that behavior change. So you've really got to make a very strong concerted effort to meet people where they are, to really help facilitate that behavior change, because that is the hardest part, but it's what we're all really looking for. So hopefully we can come back to you guys next year, the year after, with the Ocean Literacy With All research group, the component 2, and give you some more information, because this is what we're really trying to dig down deep to figure out. So it's a little less positive, but there is hope.
Yeah, good. So there is one question that came in, and we're very near the end of our time, but from Serge Avec, it's comments on what behavior changes require. What are the options? Sustainable alternatives to plastic, for example. I'm not sure, Serge, if Diana and Susan kind of address your question. I'm not sure I understand it. If not, do you want to let us know, or is there anyone that wants to take that if you think it's still, so we'll comment on what behavior changes require. What are the options? Sustainable alternatives to plastic, for example.
well, I'll give Serge a chance to kind of type some more information in there, but so you have to kind of meet people where they are. And one of the things about plastics in particular is that there are some viable options, and we all know what they are, but it's harder to get. For example, my mother, when she was a little older, needed to use a straw, to drink, but did she have to use a plastic straw? No, I bought her a stainless steel straw, but I know that. So we have to get information like that out further beyond the choir. And we have to think about which things in our lives we can substitute with something else. And then we have to facilitate that information out to more people.
And I would add to that modeling and mentoring. Oops, sorry, Carly.
Go ahead.
I would add to that modeling and mentoring. Setting an example, be the example. Very important. Go ahead, Carly.
And that's a good segue, Susan, to also bigger picture, right? So it's not just individuals, it's the collective, and that's where the public policy, which is, the title of this session, comes in. And so the decade, I think, really addresses that and making sure that we have informed policymakers. So through public opinion and advocacy, but also through informed science-based knowledge that the policymakers can use to implement bigger changes for people to enact.
Yeah, no, thanks for bringing it full circle, Carly, because that's a great way to conclude, right? I think we really speak on the communication and the public side of things, but that's really an enabler for policy, right? So I think we're at our time. I know some have a hard stop here in our group, so I'd like to really thank all of you for sharing your perspectives. I'd like to thank the audience that is here and listen to this session. Hopefully you found it interesting. I'd encourage everyone in our audience to reach out to our fantastic speakers directly and learn more and look for partnership opportunities in the work that you do with these great communicators and educators. So thank you, Carly, Maddie, Diana, and Susan for your time and contributions today. Really, really appreciate it. Enjoyed this session a lot. Wanted to let everybody online know that the Map the Gap Symposium continues tomorrow. There's a session on the Nippon Foundation alumni activities that I'd encourage you to participate in. And then there's also closing remarks tomorrow. So hopefully you can join us tomorrow. And then a video or a recording of this session will be available on the Map the Gaps YouTube channel, which the link was in the chat earlier. So we will close there and adjourn. Thank you again for participating. Really enjoyed the session.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.